where to bank in Asia. In this video, I'm going to discuss some of the things you might want to consider when thinking about where you want to bank, how to bank efficiently as an expat out in Asia. So we're going to discuss some of the things, some of the reasons why you would choose to bank in a certain location. Where you're going to want to set up bank accounts really depends on what you are trying to achieve. If you are trying to make your life a bit easier with your financial day-to-day transactions, you might want to consider getting a bank account in the country where you are living. This is so that every time you go to the ATM, you're not paying extra fees. Every time you make a purchase with EFTPOS, you're not having to pay an international transaction fee and a foreign exchange fee. It also makes your life easier if you want to hook your card up to various accounts for ride sharing, catching grabs, doing shopping on things like Lazada if you're in Thailand. All these kinds of things are going to be a lot easier if you have a local bank account. If you have quite a lot of capital and you want to put it somewhere safe in Asia, if you're looking for safe banks, it's really hard to go past Singapore. After all, this is the place where a lot of people who have significant wealth like to keep their money when they're in Asia. For example, you've got people like Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, Ray Dalio, the well-known investor in the US. These two people both have family offices and bank accounts and significant wealth held in Singapore. So if you have a lot of money and you want to keep it somewhere safe with good access to various markets around the world, Singapore is a very good place to do that. There is a bit of a hurdle to get into that. You can't just walk in off the street and open a bank account for most people. It can be done, but it usually requires putting down a bit of money in the process. Again, if you are looking at a good international jurisdiction, somewhere that is a bit more accessible than Singapore, then Hong Kong is worth a look. There's a different set of sort of pros and cons attached to Hong Kong. It's not going to be for everyone. A lot of people are pretty comfortable with it as well. But this is a really good option for people who are not willing to put down the capital, make the investment to get into Singapore. Hong Kong can be a good option for people like this. Now, if you're looking for sort of like a mid-range or like a tier 2 banking country, Malaysia is a country that comes to mind. It's not Singapore, but it is very closely related to Singapore, and it is doing a lot of work to become the next Singapore. So if you want Singapore without the price tag, Malaysia can be an option for you. It also means you're sort of getting a bit out in front of the pack. If Malaysia is going to develop the way the government wants it to develop, then it's only going to get harder to get access to it later on. So if you can get an account in Malaysia now, that could be a really good option moving into the future. It is difficult to get a bank account in Malaysia if you're not on a long-term visa such as the MM2H, but for those who are able to get an account, I think this is a good one to keep in your back pocket. With Malaysia being quite a good jurisdiction for low taxation, they're putting a lot of efforts, a lot of incentives into making it more of a financial hub. So for all of these reasons, it can be a good place to keep your money, particularly with the potential that the country has into the future. Now, if you're concerned about banking privacy, there's not much of this that exists in this day and age, but not every country is signed up to the Common Reporting Standard. Just because a country is not signed up to the CRS doesn't mean that you don't have a legal obligation to report income earned in that country back to the country where you are a tax resident. But if privacy is an important thing for you and you want a bit more of an old school banking setup in a country that is not so technology driven and not so surveillance driven, then somewhere like the Philippines or Cambodia could potentially tick that box. Now, if you have moved to a new country, if you have changed the country where you are now a tax resident, you are going to want a bank account that doesn't complicate this transition from one country to the other in regards to your tax residence. So what I'm talking about here, for an example with Australia, if you're leaving Australia as a tax resident, you have to cut a lot of your ties to the country, and closing bank accounts can be part of that process. So in that situation, you might want a good, reliable bank account in a country that is not the country that you have left, just so you don't have any unwanted, unnecessary complications with the tax office in that country. If you're sending money back and forth all the time, they might start asking questions. They might say, hang on, we think you do have an economic interest in this country, therefore we think that you are still a tax resident. You might be able to avoid some of that stuff by having a bank account outside of the country that you have left. You might also want to have a bank account in a country that is not the country you are living in for tax purposes. For example, Thailand has a tax system that is based around the remittance of income from offshore accounts into Thailand. So for that reason, if you want to manage your taxation in Thailand, you might not want to send all the money you earn into a bank account in Thailand if you do not need that money to live in Thailand. So in that instance, you might be better off sending income to another account in another country that is not Thailand. So depending on your situation, it can be a good idea to have a bank account that is not in the country where you are a tax resident currently, and also not in a country where you were previously a tax resident. There's no laws around having bank accounts in different countries. You do have to report this stuff if the country where you are a tax resident requires you to report this stuff. But you can save yourself some hassles and also potentially some taxation if you do structure things in a way that supports this. But all of this is not worth much to you if your banking setup doesn't function for you. You need to be able to use it when you want to use it without complications. Having a card that works, having a bank account, being able to send money without having to fill out a bunch of forms, it needs to be functional for you. Now, if you're interested in talking to someone about setting up a good international banking plan, looking at all of the reasons for doing it that we have been discussing in this video, we can help you to put the plan in place to lower taxation, to service investments, to take care of any potential residency issues, and just safeguard your general financial situation while living abroad. To do that, head over to offshoreinasia.com. You can send us an email there. You can also book in a consulting call if you want to get right down into it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you later.